Hello, everyone. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right? Fab. Thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you, guys. All right, we'll give it just a couple of minutes to allow a few latecomers to join, and then we will kick off. Just a reminder that today's webinar will be recorded. Well, it already has started being recorded. Is that a question, Rosetta, or just a hand up? If you've got a question, you can just pop it in the chat. Right. Oh, fab. Thank you. Amazing, Rosetta. Thank you very much. Cool. All right. Well, we can kick off, and I will keep allowing people into the meeting. I'm wondering if I can do two things at once, but hopefully I can. All right, welcome everybody to this month's webinar. So today we are going to be talking about self-care, why self-care is naturally important. We'll be talking about some general tips and tricks in order to try and apply or at least implement a little bit more self-care into our day-to-day life. I think it's really hard in today's world, or at least, I speak for myself when I say this, in such an intense and busy lifestyle that we're living, it's hard to implement even just snippets of self-care throughout the day. But I think, hopefully today, in today's session, we'll talk about what that can look like, right? We'll also talk about what is self-care. And I think for me, at least, self-care looks in a certain way. And then for other people, it will look slightly different because it is so individual, right? And we really need to try and find what works for us, what feels good for us, what is sustainable, right? We really need to find things that we can apply to our day-to-day life that we can then actually keep doing. It's no well and good to kind of apply some type of self-care if that's meditating or exercising or going to the cinema, seeing friends, if that's not what we enjoy, because we're very unlikely to keep that going. Um, so we'll really be talking about kind of why it's important, and finding ways of self-care that can be more sustainable. We'll also talk a little bit about boundaries and understanding, where are our limits and how that's also interlinked with our self-care and taking care of oneself. Before I jump in, I just want to briefly present myself. My name is Clara. I am an organizational psychologist and a consultant psychologist here at CiC Wellbeing. So very much passionate about mental health and well-being in the workplace. If you're connecting here today live, lovely, lovely to meet you. If you want to throw into the chat where you're dialing in from, your name or anything you'd like to share, then please feel free to do so. If you're connecting from YouTube and you're looking at the recording, hello from wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to look at the recording. So yeah, without further ado, I will kick off. One thing I do actually want to mention is that please feel free throughout to just, throw in any comments or questions into the chat. I will try and keep a look at the chat and answer any questions throughout. But if I do miss it, I'll try and come back to it after. All right, so what are we looking at today? Well, actually, interestingly enough, there is a day for self-care. There are many, many days throughout the year, but I think it's actually really lovely that we have an International Self-Care Day, and it falls on the 24th of July, quite literally because it is 24/7. And that really just reflects the idea around we should really be self-caring. We should really be having some sort of self-care every single day, right? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that can be, taking care of ourselves for a minute a day, waking up in the morning, thinking about the things that we'd like to achieve that day, or in the evening, or at any point, but really making sure we're creating and providing a space and time for ourselves. As I said at the beginning, life is becoming extremely complicated, fast paced. We have this whole new world online on social media. Many of us are working remotely, right? Which allows us to live very flexible lifestyles, but also quite lonely and solitary lifestyles. We are often just online in front of our computer getting our work done. So we throw ourselves and we immerse ourselves into almost a different sort of space or world. And I think it's difficult for us to bring it back to reality and to just that moment and that space and that time. And I think that's where we have to start thinking about, right, okay, where can I just take 5 minutes or so a day to really just create a space for me where I'm dedicating a little bit of time to think about my needs or even how I'm feeling. How am I feeling physically? How am I feeling emotionally? What have I not kind of given to myself in the past few days that I know makes me happy? And how can I change that and make that happen? And I think these are the sort of questions we can start asking ourselves, especially, if we're not used to doing things that are caring for ourselves. If we start asking ourselves these questions, we can maybe come to some answers. I'm curious to hear from you guys though. How do you define self-care? If I had to ask you, what are the things that you think of when I say the term self-care? What sort of general words or sentences pop up? If I speak for myself, self-care is taking the time to think about my needs and think about the things that bring me joy and that bring me a sense of accomplishment. Because not only does that make me feel good and happy, but also allows me to kind of, yeah, function well in life. And I feel that when I do provide a little bit of time and engage in those self-care activities, I lead a fuller and more accomplished lifestyle. Yeah, so someone's mentioned time to be outside of my other roles in life. Yeah, lovely. So really kind of taking the time to have different roles and also really enjoying that space, right? If I'm a parent, really enjoying that time versus maybe when I'm in my walking group and I'm engaging with that. Oh, lots of stuff coming through. We've got allowing myself rest. Yeah, rest is massive, and we'll talk about sleep, right? Sleep or rest, those are two different things, but just slowing things down and taking that moment to just, yeah, have a breath of fresh air. Someone said taking time to consider my own needs, me time, beautiful. Yeah, me time. It's sometimes it's difficult to find me time, especially as I said, if we're kind of parents or if we've got lots of different activities going on, different communities. And what me time will look like will be different, right? Both within different periods of our life, but also between ourselves and our colleagues and our friends. Someone said doing things that make me happy and allow me to gain distance from the more stressful aspects of my life. Yeah, I love that kind of physical, almost feeling of separation. And sometimes that can be quite a mental thing, right? So detaching oneself maybe in a book, right? And so I throw myself into the world of my book. And for other people, it might be quite literally having to go further away, right? So taking the weekend to go maybe for a nice walk in nature. And so I'm really removing myself from maybe that aspect of a slightly more stressful life. Prioritizing myself over my to-do list. Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Especially if actually accomplishing things is something that makes us feel good. It might not be a form of self-care, but it's a kind of feel-good factor. And that's interesting to differentiate between the two. So prioritizing myself is that self-care component. Love that. Someone said time on my own to relax and read and be quiet. Yeah, some people need a little bit of, I wouldn't say solitude, but yeah, also solitude. Just being by by themselves and just really enjoying that space. And other individuals might want to be connected with others and socialize and create those bonds. And both of those are forms of self-care. Doing things I enjoy. Someone has said, this has been my learning. I used to have a 15-minute break for a cup of tea and think it was self-care. Now I have learned it is listening to my needs and responding to that and looking after myself. Oh, interesting. So actually, maybe some of us are doing things which we may think is self-care, but it isn't actually listening to oneself. And that's a really important word you've used there, listening actively to our needs and to how we feel, right? Both physically and emotionally. And that may look different every single day. Not doing things in a haste. Yeah, I feel like often we do things quite quickly, don't we? And we don't take the time, even if it is, for example, making a cup of tea, if that is, a form of self-care for us that day. We sort of do so in a way that's quick and fast, and then suddenly, oh, we've made the cup of tea, and that's only taken us, 30 odd seconds. But if we take the time to actually notice and be present and notice the kettle boil, grab the milk from the fridge and all of these processes, it actually becomes a moment and it becomes a space where we can be connected with that thing and with ourselves. Oh, someone else has said trying to eat a healthy diet. Absolutely. And we'll talk about diet, right? All of these are forms of self-care because it's about taking care of my body. It's a cycle. I know that if I rest, if I take care of my body by eating well, by drinking enough, and exercising, all of these different components, although, it may be boring and frustrating and all of these things that, are good for us might be slightly harder to do or to implement, but they are a form of self-care. They're a way of saying I care about myself, I care about my body, and so I'm going to do things that are going to kind of aid that and help that. Absolutely, great stuff. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So if we think about all of the different things that we mentioned, we can kind of think about self-care in kind of 7 pillars, right? So first is kind of that knowledge and health literacy. So I think really understanding what good health looks like and also how to achieve it is really important, right? Also being able to differentiate between that good and that accurate information versus the incorrect and less trusted source of knowledge, and being able to pick out the things that are important to us, right? We're not all going to necessarily care about a certain component because that's the trend, right? There may be differences there. If we're women, we may be looking at how can I incorporate, I don't know, more iron into my diet or other aspects like that. So having also health literacy, I think, also means you're going to be more likely to make positive choices, right? So there comes that intention of understanding and learning more. Then we kind of have that mental well-being. And I think that leads into having that self-awareness and that agency, right? To put all of this information then into practice. So this involves understanding yourself, applying it to different contexts, using this information that I've learned and that I've researched to help us make good and healthy choices based on my own needs, my abilities, my energy levels that day, right? One day I may not feel so good. And I think mental well-being is a major part of our self-care journey, right? One day we may feel a little bit better, another day we may feel a little bit less good. And I think responding to that is going to be important, and also just accepting it, right? We're not all going to feel great and exceptional every single day. And so we just need to have that self-awareness and kindness with ourselves to be able to think, okay, so today I don't feel I can really tackle this challenge so much, and I'm going to be kinder to myself, and I'm going to maybe implement a little bit more self-care, right? And other days we may feel a little bit more resilient. Then comes that physical activity part, right? That really helps us feel better, both from a physical perspective, but also a mental perspective. It really boosts our mood. It releases a series of different hormones, such as like endorphins, that make us essentially feel good, right? And it also brings positive benefits from other areas in our life, such as sleep. If we exercise, we're more likely to have higher quality and quantity of sleep. And can also reduce stress, which is one of the major components that often a lot of us feel and experience, and one of the main things that lead us to start thinking about self-care. We mentioned healthy eating just now, and how that can be really important for both our mind and our body. Um, Again, eating just like exercise, sleep, and a variety of other aspects is going to look very different for everyone, right? It's going to be very individual. So taking into account, understanding what is appropriate for me, right? What is my best diet? What is the best diet that fits my body, my activity levels, my age, etc. And we can find some guidance online, and also maybe through friends and family, right? Learning from others. I think that's also a form of self-care, right? If that's something that we're interested in, that we engage in, I think that's also an excellent way to do so. Then we've got things such as risk avoidance. And I think that's really important, right? Protecting ourselves from risk and harm is important. It seems a little bit obvious, but actually, when we do engage in risky behavior, it's often a sign that we're not kind of looking out for ourselves so much, right? And naturally, then there's this whole world of actually risk can sometimes be something that we enjoy, right? Bungee jumping might be a hobby of some of us. I can definitely say that it is not mine. However, within moderation and thinking about the context and why we're doing certain things. Then we go into good hygiene. I think this is a massive one, right? Often it's really difficult when we're feeling a little bit low, when we're feeling like we don't have that energy and we're not really taking care of ourselves. That's the first thing that goes for some of us. If that's personal hygiene, so maybe, yeah, not really caring about wearing dirty clothes or showering, or also just the hygiene around us, not choosing to clean our houses, right? And I think if we can catch ourselves maybe falling into that trap, that's when we need to just take a moment and think, okay, this is happening, and that's okay. What steps can I do to make sure that I am taking care of myself? And that might be, having a nice shower, putting on some fresh sheets on our bed, and hoovering, and doing these things that actually creates an environment that's also good for us, right? And that makes us feel good. Um, And then last but not least is kind of that use of both self-care products, services, and that literacy that we learned about before, right? And that can go all the way from kind of using gym equipment, so exercising, to sun cream, because I know that's going to protect my body, right? Or even if I'm someone that exercises a lot, am I reintegrating accurately with healthy eating, right? So all of these are different things that we can think about. So I'm curious, what are the things that strikes you most in terms of the pillars that we see here? Do any come to a surprise? Would you add any more pillars in terms of the main components of self-care? What are the things that you think you would incorporate as the main components? I mean, we mentioned a few already, right? Around, yeah, that healthy eating and taking time for ourselves. I think potentially here we can definitely add rest, right? As we mentioned before, rest is a big one, and sleep, and we'll talk about that soon. Oh, lovely. Someone said listening to music. Yeah, I think that's a really important one. It allows us to connect in a different way using one of our senses, right? That sense of sound really impacts our emotions quite a lot. Family and home time. Yeah, that's a core pillar of ours. Absolutely. Silence too, yeah. Beautiful. I think that's again how individual that will look like. Silence sometimes can be, for some of us, quite stressful. And for other individuals, a really peaceful space to just sit in one's thoughts or even not think of anything. Um, Meditation, I think, is a form of that, right? Just sitting in that space and just feeling, right? And that's why I think self-care is so beautiful, because it is so varied and it will be adapted according to the individual and according to the day. Um, so what impacts our ability to self-care? I think here we can ask ourselves, why are we here today, right? Why have you connected to this webinar? Maybe you're struggling to find the time to take to self-care, or maybe as we said before, you're too busy or too stressed. So what are the main sort of obstacles that we find to be able to implement some more self-care strategies. Now, some of the most common, as we've said, is busyness. So feeling overwhelmed, feeling also quite stressed, and not being able to switch off, and not being able to, especially now that we're working from home, there isn't that kind of third space, right, between our work and our home. We're almost living where we're working and working where we're living, and it makes it difficult for us to detach. That physical health aspect, when our physical health is impacted, we may feel like we can't create time for our self-care, right? Our brains almost focus so much on that component of our poor physical health that we feel, or we forget at least, to take that time for ourselves. And the same goes for mental health. When we feel that our mental health is suffering, we don't take the time to care for ourselves. Sometimes we may say, it may almost become a form of punishment, right? I don't deserve, I don't deserve to take care of myself. I need to keep working, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. I need to take care of others. And I think that's where we need to kind of stop ourselves and just think, okay, I'm feeling like this, and that's okay. What can I do then to be able to change how I'm feeling? What's one thing that I can do to be able to feel a little bit better and implement some form of self-care? Relationships. How many of you here are either parents or carers, or even just very close friends to some people that you feel like you're almost caring for on a day-to-day basis? Just give me a thumbs up if you're any of those. You can feel that sometimes it's difficult to create the space. Yeah, quite a few. Thank you. It's difficult, right, to create that time for ourselves in that space. Taking care for others takes time. It's a whole other human being or multiple human beings that we'll be supporting. Um, so often our priorities just jump straight to the bottom. But we need to remember that if we're not recharging and if we're not rebuilding our needs and our energy levels, then we may lead to kind of that burnout state, or at least a state of inability to do anything. And then we won't even be able to help that individual. So just thinking about, let's not get to that point, right? And let's keep that self-care on a day-to-day basis. And I think that also flows into that self-image. Some of us may experience feelings of poor self-image, which leads to poor mental health. And then we feel again like we don't deserve self-care. And that's a difficult trap to fall into, right? So I just kind of I encourage you to think, what are the things that get in the way of your self-care, right? Because I feel it's going to be very individual for all of us. But what are some of the obstacles that you face in being able to implement different types of self-care? And just think about, okay, how can I potentially then overcome these? That's the first step in being able to do that. As I said, self-care is very individual. Now, here are some ideas that have been proven to be extremely effective in improving our overall well-being. But again, this is definitely not an exhaustive list, right? I resonate with a lot of these, but some of them do not work for me, right? And I think that's the beauty of self-care. So I'm curious, which of these kind of, have a think about what are some of the things that you could start doing today, or some of the things that you already do? Are there any here or are there any that you can think of that aren't on here that you'd love to be able to share with others? Because I think that's also a way to show self-care, right? If you see and you're having a chat with someone who is clearly struggling, and you can share an insight in terms of something that has helped you, that's also a form of self-care, supporting and helping others, right? Again, it'll depend on people. Now, as we talked about before, exercise is one of the best way and one of the best forms of self-care. It's also, a good way to keep our bodies fit and healthy. But even if that just means kind of going for a walk 30 minutes a day, right? I think it's difficult sometimes for us to think, oh, I've got to exercise, and that means tomorrow I need to go on a 10-kilometer run. No, reminding ourselves that things have to be sustainable. What do I enjoy? Do I enjoy going for a walk, or do I enjoy doing a little bit of yoga in my room? One thing we haven't really mentioned is screen time. A lot of us work from computers, and then we switch to our phones, and then we're maybe back to our computer, then we're maybe having a call with someone if we've got friends internationally. It can be really difficult to actually come back to reality, especially late at night, right before we go to sleep, and we're on our screens all the time. So just thinking about how can I create that detachment? How can I reconnect with myself and my surroundings? Maybe that also means connecting with nature again. Nature's been shown to significantly improve our mental health. Sorry, I've just noticed a couple of comments in the chat here. Some of you guys have mentioned, yeah, in the previous slide around self-worth, actually needing to feel worth for self-care. Yeah, and that's really challenging, right? Feeling worthy of self-care. And I think sometimes it does take a little bit of fake it till you make it, right? Getting out for that 10-minute walk. And then once we're on that walk, we actually can look around us and breathe in that fresh air and think, okay, now I feel connected to myself again, right? We need to almost just push ourselves initially to just start doing that. Maybe just start by cleaning our desk in the evening, right? Small little steps can sometimes lead to actually much bigger ones. Someone's mentioned guilt. Yeah, that can be a big obstacle to self-care, especially if it means, oh, if I'm taking the time for me, that means taking away the time from someone else. But remember, you will have to live with you forever, for the rest of your lives, and so you need to take care of yourself. You've been given, you've been given your bodies, you've been given your your own mental health, you've been given yourselves, and so in that we need to take care of what we've been given, right? And so if we don't take care of ourselves, again, we can't take care of others. So again, it's that kind of cycle that we're thinking of there. A couple of other things here that we haven't mentioned around volunteering. Many individuals feel a sense of kind of happiness and pride and a feeling of self-worth actually from helping others. So sometimes that can come from supporting others, but it depends on how we view it, right? Is this just something that I'm doing for someone else, or actually am I gaining something from this? And do I feel good about supporting others? Some of us prefer kind of a more mentally taxing job. So thinking about maybe some kind of complex tasks or like brain puzzles that can be really good. Reading either motivational stories or even kind of any stories, right? Or any book that really remove us from maybe that moment in time. It doesn't necessarily have to always be me sitting in the present. Now, I think that's an important thing to do. I think sitting and listening to ourselves is important. We don't do that so often, right? We often try to hide away in our phones. How many of us kind of scroll on social media to really just feel like we're detaching from our work, but we're not actually connecting with ourselves. We're just reverting back to something else and distracting ourselves. So taking a moment to just sit and actually, connect with ourselves is important. And then we can, of course, go to maybe some of those things that bring us into a new world. But yeah, these are kind of some of the many different ideas that are out there. We spoke a little bit about sleep before. Sleep actually has an extremely powerful impact on our mental health, and it can actually increase the risk of depression, dementia, and also possible stroke or heart disease. And that's quite a scary thing to think about. But, we do spend almost half of our lives sleeping. And so we really need to create an environment where we sleep enough and have high quality sleep, right? So trying to stick to around 7 hours of sleep. Now, do kind of consider this for your independently in terms of subjectively for yourself, because different individuals will need different types, different levels of sleep. So again, take that kind of with a pinch of salt. But yeah, trying to stick to around 7 hours, I think, is really, really important. It also allows us to feel like our brain is functioning well, right? Which then improves our personal life, but also our working life. And if we feel like we're performing at work, we then also feel happier and more positive about ourselves. So again, everything is sort of connected within that. Lack of sleep, as I mentioned before, of course, impacts our physical kind of well-being and health, but also our ability to learn and consolidate memories. When we sleep, we actually move the information that we've learned from our short-term memory to our long-term memory, where it is then stored. And that's when we can then recall that information at a later date. And that's a really important point for a working individual, right? If we need to, if we want to perform well at work and we've learned something new, we need that sleep to be able to then consolidate that into our long-term memory to then, recall that at a later date. Um, it significantly impacts our mood and emotional well-being. So if we have poor sleep, I can definitely put my hand up and say that if I don't sleep enough, I'm not a happy bunny and I will not be for the rest of the day. And that significantly impacts my mood. So therefore, my relationship with others, I might be a little bit more short-tempered, right? My responses might be a little bit more rude or a little bit kind of shorter and more abrupt. And therefore, that kind of it may hinder that relationship, both with my colleagues, with my family, or potentially also with people outside of. It significantly impacts our digestion. Give me a thumbs up if you've experienced that when you maybe have had poor sleep and your appetite is significantly impacted by that. Skin health, stress levels, many, many other components. Self-esteem also. And last but not least, weight, which goes back to also what we were talking about before with the 7 pillars. So have a think about what are the things that get in the way of a good night's sleep for you. For me, definitely screens impact the quality of my sleep. So if I'm kind of on my phone at night, may not impact the quantity, but definitely the quality, which is just as important, if not more. Right, a lot of research, more recent research suggests that actually, even if we sleep fewer hours, it doesn't matter as much. The important thing is actually the quality and the kind of stages that we go through in our sleep. So yeah, just kind of have a think about what are those things. A lot of people will exercise in the evening, which is a great way to relax the body and get kind of tired and ready for bed. Some other people might actually feel quite energized by that and then struggle to sleep for quite a few hours. So this is also a form of self-care, thinking about what works for me and how can I adapt my day-to-day schedules to ensure that I'm therefore, exercising at a time that suits me and suits my sleep schedule. Even if maybe, it suits someone else, but it doesn't suit me, we need to allow ourselves, right, to think, no, but this doesn't work for me. I'd prefer to do it like this. Nutrition. We spoke a little bit about nutrition and how a healthy and balanced diet is essential for our physical health, but also for our mental health. It keeps our energy levels up. It reduces, some pretty negative health conditions, keeps our bones and our joints strong, and yeah, promotes positive well-being. And last but not least, again, improves our sleep. As I said before, what you eat and how much will look different for everyone. So do kind of, yeah, consider what makes me feel good, right? If you find that having a certain diet makes you feel energized, makes you feel refreshed, makes you feel focused at work, fantastic, right? If you want to change anything in your diet, and it's quite a significant change, I would always suggest reaching out to your GP just to ensure that you're getting all of those vitamins and minerals that we do need, enough protein, enough fats, enough carbohydrates, all of the kind of components of a healthy diet. But yeah, I think, really just kind of tap into what feels good. Especially because each body has, its own microbiome, which means that we're all going to respond to foods and to drinks differently, right? So just tap into kind of the things that will work for you. Movement is next. And I think here we really need to think about what do I enjoy? What fits into my day-to-day lifestyle? If some of us have shift schedules or maybe we're working really early in the morning versus really late at night, how will that change how I exercise? What is sustainable? Right? What is something that I enjoy that I can do for a long period of time? I think a good way of thinking about what that is by thinking about SMART goals, right? Thinking about something that's specific, something measurable, something attainable, realistic, and time bound. So you don't have to run a marathon tomorrow or swim 5 kilometers. Think about something that you think you can achieve, right? And then feel proud about yourself when you do that, because that's also a form of self-care, kind of giving yourself a pat on the back, right? Let's not forget to actually applaud the things that we do achieve. I think it's very easy for us to kind of keep going in life and just achieve all these things and not take a moment and think, goodness, wow, I actually, I delivered that presentation, or I went on that walk, or I did X, Y, Z, and just sitting in that moment and thinking, well done me, I did that. That is also a form of self-care. And sometimes we struggle to do that, right? We think we're not worthy of being able to just, yeah, be proud of ourselves. I think one of the most important thing to mention is avoiding a sedentary lifestyle. Now, actually, research is now suggesting that whilst exercise is essential and really, really important, the sort of silent killer, as described by the Department of Health, is actually that being inactive, right? So being sedentary, not getting up. And I think it's really difficult nowadays where we are working from home, right? A lot of us kind of jump out of bed, brush our teeth, maybe grab some breakfast, and then straight to our computers, and we haven't really taken any steps. And so that's why we have to actively think about, okay, how can I get outside the house and maybe just walk around the blocks a few times, or maybe organize an evening drink with someone, but walk there rather than take the tube or the bus. Something I've been doing recently is actually getting out at a stop before my stop. If I'm going to the office, for example, and I'm commuting, I'll just get off at the stop prior and then finish that off with a walk. So I'm kind of still, I'm still walking a little bit, not as much as maybe I would like, but at least that's getting in a few steps in the morning. And that starts my day better, right? I just feel more energized when I get to the office. So thinking about these are kind of tips and tricks that we can do to try and just get those, if it's extra steps or if it's an extra hour's sleep, it doesn't really matter what we're thinking. It's just about how can I make sure that I'm implementing these aspects of self-care into my life and what works best for me. And again, I think that aspect needs to be sustainable, right? Again, if we're doing it a little bit, but every single day, that's better than doing it never or once every 3 months, right? Oh, I've gone on a walk and I did a whole day out today. I was in the sun all day, fantastic. I don't have to do it for another 3 weeks. That's not self-care, right? We want to be keeping that quite often. So please do share, what is your sort of go-to movement? And how does this impact not only your physical well-being, but also your mental well-being, right? Have a think about, does it impact my sleep also? I'm a runner myself. I also enjoy swimming, which for me is really, really actually a great space to completely detach from reality and from kind of the outside world. And I just look at the black line on the bottom of the pool and think about just that. Some people might find that to be hell, but for me, that works great. So yeah, other individuals like kind of connecting with others through exercise, and that's also a form of self-care. And there are some people that prefer exercises that is more individual. So again, think about what works best for you. Finding space, we spoke a little bit, and some of you shared about finding space and time to be able to tap into how you are and how you're feeling. And when you do create just those, 5 to 10 minutes, have a think about, how do I feel physically? How do I feel emotionally and mentally? Um, Before that, think about, how do I find the time? Do I find the time? I actually do this in the morning because I find that that's the moment that I can, take just 5 minutes before I get up and get ready for the day to just think about myself, just think about me, think about what I need that day. And that changes every day. Someone just said, yeah, I walk the dog before starting work. Fantastic. That's a moment for you, right? No one will take that away from you. And that's a lovely way to kick off the day. And it can be a routine, which is also a form of self-care, right? Um, Thinking about rewards and don't punish yourself also if you don't achieve something, right? Sometimes keeping things up is pretty tough, right? We can't be perfect every single day, and that's absolutely fine. I think that's also a form of self-care, right? Just accepting that we're human and that sometimes we don't manage to go on that walk or we don't manage to cook the healthiest meal. It's okay. Absolutely fine. Maybe my next meal will be a little bit better, right? And I think if we try to kind of start small and make things more manageable, That's much better and a much more realistic way of approaching self-care. So if there's one thing that I'd like you kind of to take away also following today is how and when can I take that time? Can I find that time for self-care? Right. When we do feel overwhelmed, it can be also really difficult to take that time for ourselves. And I think, here there are some examples that we can follow or some tips that we can use to try and tap into that. And talking and having a conversation with someone and just saying, look, I'm not feeling great today. These are the things that I need, and I'm not achieving that is really, really important. I think often speaking up and actually sharing with someone else, I feel like I don't have this right now, and I kind of need it to feel a little bit better, or this is how I'm feeling. Even just saying that is a form of self-care. So it's important to share things and to not keep this in. And that can be, to our colleagues, to our friends, to the EAP, to whoever we think is the person we can open up to, right? But it's important to speak up. Prioritizing things. Sometimes you do need to come first, right? Even if it is, I think, even if it is just 5 minutes, if you need to just, mention, sorry, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to the meeting. I just need this moment. Because if you really need that moment for your self-care, that is going to be so important for the rest of the day and for the longer term. Think about also getting creative when you do feel overwhelmed, when you feel like there's a lot going on. How can you maybe detach from that and reconnect with your senses? I think, or even listening to music, as someone mentioned before, right? Or singing, or being able to paint, or kind of using a puzzle or something. Using a different area of your brain can also help calm and bring yourself back to that moment. Exercise, I'm sorry, I know I've mentioned it 1,000 times, and the same thing goes for rest, but these things are important, right? And they're things that we need to implement if we feel like we're not at the moment. So which of these do you do? And which of these do you feel like maybe you should or could start implementing? Um, Again, when we feel overwhelmed, be kind to yourselves. I think, first of all, be kind to others and those around you in the community. This can also boost serotonin and endorphins, which again are those hormones that are a feel-good factor. They make us feel satisfied and feel like we're accomplishing something, right? When we feel like everything around us isn't happening and isn't going our way, we feel satisfied and can reduce our anxiety quite significantly. Um, and again, let's be kind to ourselves, right? It's difficult, but we need to remember that we're not perfect. We are human beings. We sometimes will, get things right, sometimes get things wrong, and we need to kind of give ourselves that permission to get things wrong and to also maybe be proud of ourselves, to enjoy things, to take that moment for ourselves and to say no to others, right? Even saying no is a form of self-care if that is what we need in that moment in time. And I love this quote from Audre Lorde, who's an American feminist and writer. Caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is a self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. I think that's beautiful, right? We need to remember that. Um, Someone has just said, yeah, so you'll be able to see the recording of this. So you'll be able to access all of these slides. Absolutely. Um, so taking that time again, just to finish up, thinking about, even if it is just 5 minutes, turn off that technology. We don't want our phones or emails pinging. Take a deep breath, reconnect with your body, with your mind. Identify, what do I need? And what do I need to do to meet these needs, right? And even just a simple question of, what do I need today? Just today, what do I need today? Or what do I need right now? Ask yourself that question, because often we don't, right? And have a think about now that I'm asking you that, or that you're asking yourselves, what's coming up? What are the things that you're thinking about, right? What did you think of when you asked yourself, what do I need today? Or what do I need now? And what can you do to actually have that happen? To kind of, yeah, finish up, we can think about some of the ways that we can achieve well-being. We've spoken about self-care, but well-being also as a whole. Again, that exercise component, taking notice of ourselves and of others. Keep learning, keeping ourselves in a state of knowledge is important. Giving to others and connecting with others. So that's a really important one at the end that we haven't really spoken about so much, but social connection is a real mood booster, right? And can really promote that feeling of positive emotional well-being. Um, what do you need to do if you need self-care or support? So, as I said, speak to individuals, managers, HR, occupational health. Think of the EAP. Is it a local community you can reach out to? Do you have a trusted peer, a friend, or a family? Any other kind of individuals that you can think of, or any other areas where you can achieve that self-care? Have a think and share that with others, right? Signpost to your colleagues or to your friends if there are certain communities that you think that they would benefit from. That's also a form of self-care. So to finish up, I'd like you to think about these three things. What is one thing that you're going to start doing? What is one thing that you're going to continue doing? And what is one thing that you're going to stop doing moving forward when trying to prioritize your self-care? Um, Thank you everyone so much for attending today's webinar. If there are any questions, please drop them in the chat. Hopefully, you can take some time to implement that self-care that you thought about when asking yourselves, what do I need today? If you do have 5 minutes, please take the time to provide some feedback. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone and happy self-care. Remember, on the 24th, it is self-care day. So do think about that morning and think about how can you really create a day of self-care, and then every day moving forward. But yeah, if there are no questions, thank you everyone so much and have a lovely evening. Great idea. Love that. I'm going to add self-care into my calendar. Absolutely. Excellent suggestion. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Oh.